But it's 7, and I'm going to call this meeting to
Okay.
order because we have a full house. Yeah, that's good. And don't need to do the roll call because I did that silently. All members are present and accounted for. So we'll just proceed to the approval of last month's minutes. Does anyone have questions or comments about the minutes?
I only have one question because I wasn't here last time. I just wanted, was there something shared with the 5-year strategic plan? Was there actually like a doc or anything that was shared last time?
No.
Not outside of the meeting.
It was presented.
Yeah, I
Okay.
showed it here, but that'll be forthcoming. I have my marketing person working on.
Great. I just didn't want to make sure I didn't miss anything.
Yeah.
Cool. Thank you.
Do you have a motion to approve?
I'll second.
Motion passes. We actually have a member of the public here with us tonight. Welcome, Amy.
Thank you.
Thank you for setting the precedent. We haven't had a visitor in a while.
Great.
Would you like to take the floor and say something?
My name is Amy Bruin. I work for Boulder County, and I grew up in Longmont, and I raised my children out in Firestone, and I recently moved from Johnstown back here. And I'm just looking for a way to get involved in the community, and I just adore the library. So I just recently volunteered with the library book sale, so that was fun. And I spend all my money at the book sale. Even so, yeah, it was interesting to learn like what the Friends of the Library, how much money they make and how it funds different things. And so I did consider, I am very interested in serving on the board. I don't think I qualify this year, but maybe next year. So I just thought I would come and check it out and see what it's all about and introduce myself. So. Thanks.
Wonderful. Well, I'm happy to follow up with you after the meeting or exchange contacts and any questions that you have. I know I'm going to speak for everybody. We're all pretty friendly and would be happy to answer questions about the board.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Happy to have you.
Thanks.
Thanks for coming.
Where are you working in the county?
I work for Human Services, Boulder County Human Services, on the communications team.
Excellent. Nice to have you. Please. Let's dive into some new business.
Well, I went crazy trying to think of an icebreaker that none of you would have had before to help. That's crazy. So I'm just going to start as if this is, everyone's first week. So my icebreaker is to mention a book that had a big influence on you when you were growing up. And I'll break the ice. If it's appropriate. You can break my own ice.
The rules for the icebreaker.
Okay, so the book that immediately sprang to mind when I was thinking about this was The Island of the Blue Dolphins by Scott Liddell. Has anybody read that or remember? I loved that book. So it was about a young woman, loosely based on a true story. It was about a young woman who had gotten left behind on an island off the coast of California when the rest of her people had been moved away basically by missionaries because they had been attacked by like a tribe of Venetians. Anyways, she got left behind with her brother by mistake, and it's about how she survived for 18 years on this island. And I loved it so much, and I think I checked it out like every 6 months or something. Went back and looked at that book. And thinking back now, why I liked it was, first of all, it was beautifully written. And I think it was the first time I paid attention to how nicely a book was written. He won a California Award for it, obviously he was a good writer. But also because it was about a young woman, and she learns to take care of herself and to survive and deal with the animals on the island. And looking back now, I just realized that probably as a young girl, I just loved the idea that this book was just about this person and about how she did, and that she turned out fine, the relationship. So And as a coda, I went back and was looking up just to see what I remembered about it. And something interesting about it is that it's now considered to be kind of inappropriate because it was written from the voice of a noble savage. But to redeem it, several professors got together and wrote a new edition and had different essays. So now, if you want to teach it in your school or just read the book, it gives you different perspectives on things that you might not have thought. So anyway, all around, great book.
That's interesting to know. I grew up with that book too, but did not know about the more recent developments or updates that were made.
Well, I think this is really interesting. It's serendipity. I just read a book that my granddaughter has been reading and loved, and it's called Alone. And it's about a girl who gets left behind in her town when everyone is evacuated for some unspecified threat. And you never really find out what the threat was because she's only 10 or 11 and she doesn't know. And she has to survive alone, and she gets very lonely. But she finds a dog, which is great, and then she goes around to houses and businesses wherever she can get in, and gets canned food and bottled water because the water shuts off and the electricity shuts off, and it's all about what she does, but it's also about how she feels and how scared she is and lonely and no one to talk to. And this is really, really something.
Common theme.
Yeah. And a book that I really liked and read twice when I was in 4th grade was Swiss Family Robinson, which was about them surviving. But I went back and read it as an adult. I mean, I just loved it because it was all about what they had to do and this kind of stuff. But I went back and read it as an adult. And oh my God, every animal they see, they either shoot it or they catch it. And the writing is, it's just, it was written in the late 18th century. So, But at the time, it was really interesting to me, and it was the longest fad. It was the longest book.
I'm happy to go next. For me, I was a serial reader when I was a kid, and I think the series that kind of probably had an impact on me the most was the American Girl doll books, and probably started my lifelong passion for historical fiction, which now I probably wouldn't qualify as like what I would think of as good historical fiction in an adult. But I started reading some of the series to my 10-year-old, and when I was a kid, there was probably like 3 or 4 of them out, and now there's so many, and they're told in a much more authentic way, although some of them are so heavy that my 10-year-old makes me take a pause. But I think it's really good then to have those conversations. It's just a really good starting point. This is just really interesting because I loved them as a kid, but I'm enjoying them again as a parent. And, yeah.
I can't remember which book it was I'm thinking about. I read so many books that to pick one that has a big impact is really hard. But I read the Tamora Pierce books, which are okay, cool. They're there's a bunch of series, and I'm not sure which one it was that I was reading that I'm thinking of, but it's basically in a magical fantasy kind of medieval knights and stuff land or whatever. So it's all about a girl in each series who goes off and becomes a knight or a magician or whatever, something like that. They were great, I loved them. But I met my best friend because I happened to be holding the book on the playground, and she was like, I'm reading the exact same book, and then we were friends for forever now since then. So that was the one that stuck out to me. I was like, that was probably the biggest impact on me.
My favorite book, and I probably read it for the first time when I was maybe 9 or 10, probably 10, was Wise Child by Monica Furlong. And I've met a few people who who have read that book and it's like you read it and you love it. But it's not the most common book. I don't think it's in the schools. It's a fantasy set in 5th century Cornwall. And it centers on a young girl who is basically an orphan, and her unlikely friendship with sort of the village witch or wise woman, and the girl herself is a misfit, and this wise woman is both relied on and kind of ostracized a little bit. So they kind of become friends, and it's really a coming of age story, but the setting really appealed to me. It is very like historical fiction-y, but there is like this element of is it magic? Is it something else? Is she a witch? Does she just know her herbs?
Right.
You're never really sure, and I like that ambiguity. But it has kind of like been this thing that's come back again and again throughout my life. Like I've encountered it in very unexpected places and conversations. And I wound up rereading it with my girls a few years ago. And so like rereading that story, like I reread it maybe like every 10 years, and I always get like something different based on like who I am. So yeah, I will offer that of a Wise Child. And there's a couple of sequels to it that are also really good, but not as good as that first book.
Did an adult come to it for the first time and enjoy it?
I think so. And then I looked into Monica Furlong and her life story, and she has a very interesting background. Yeah, I think it would open new doors for you as an adult.
I just looked it up and I'm like shocked that I missed that as a child. Like voraciously read and everything. It's like so weird.
I don't think it was like really promoted here in the U.S. Do you want to share?
I can share next. One of the books I just fell in love with reading was The Never-Ending Story by Michael Ende. The first time I read it, it wasn't actually just, it was like preteen kind of, but I lost track of time when I was reading it. I was like, oh, it's been 3 hours. It was just the very first book that I read all the way through. I mean, I blazed through that book, but it was the first book that I'd read that was like, I want to write like this. This is, it's simple enough for children to follow along. It's written for that age group, but it is also very well hooked for adult readers as well, I think. And also out of interest because the author, I've always wanted to read it in German. I own it in German, but I've never actually delved into that.
Wow.
But eventually I'd like to get to that point to actually read it in German as well. So that would be awesome.
I mean, I don't know. So, I mean, the thing I thought about, as a young kid, I was a pretty reluctant reader. And I know, here I am. Whatever. That's what drew me. I was like, wait,
Right.
this is actually pretty cool.
Right.
But as a kid, and I don't know if these still exist, but there were these books, like these choose your own adventures.
Oh, yes, I love
Okay,
those too.
everyone's rolling their eyes. Or acknowledging, whatever, I'll take it. But, I mean, that got me reading, like, in a big way. So for me, that was an impact because it was always a struggle as a young kid. I was slow, I always was in, like, back then we had, like, remedial reading classes, and so, I was in the slow group, but then when I found those, it just, like, a light switch went on, and I was engaged. So it just takes the right thing, right? And so that's just, in general, so it's not any specific book or author.
Yeah.
I couldn't tell you what I read.
Well, I was
But
going
it
to
was
ask you,
so
do you
fun.
remember what your favorite one
No,
was?
not at all.
I read them a lot
They're
too, and
so-
I read them a
so
lot
generic.
too, and I don't
We have a
remember.
bunch of them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't, do they still, they still
Yeah,
do that?
they're
Yeah.
in the junior fiction.
Yeah, I just,
Because we-
There's an
can you
adult.
go back?
version of Hamlet called To Be or Not to Be, which is a choose your own adventure.
God, I got it.
And maybe would fix Hamlet or ruin Hamlet depending on your perspective.
Oh, wow. God.
I still remember some of the
I wonder if that's ever been done as a play, since Hamlet's
Oh,
on
maybe.
stage.
Maybe. Yeah, that would be good.
So, anyway.
I get the sense that they would like commission different authors to write the next book in the series, and some of them are like bizarre. Like some of the storylines, like the ant people. I loved that one. There was a great
Yeah.
vampire one.
Yeah. The focus was
It was,
really on
just,
adventure.
it was just the mystery
Right,
of it,
the
I think,
adventure
and
and
then,
picking it, yeah.
just,
Yeah.
okay, how does this end, and then how does this end, anyway.
Mm-hmm.
But it was a huge impact for me. It could have gone either way as a young person trying to struggle to read, so.
And we did choose your adventure.
There was the Choose Your Own Adventure 2 in the DC Comics section of Wonder Woman. And she,
So these
kiddo,
still,
yes.
these still exist.
And that one's
It makes me
pretty good.
feel great, because like,
That one's pretty good too because it's based on an actual like DC character.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
oh my gosh, my kiddo made me read a different, like we had to go back and reread and go back and reread
Okay,
to get to
I
like all
gotcha.
the iterations.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, we have one for my 3-year-old.
Yeah.
Really?
Wow. For
It's like all like,
that's
yeah, they
amazing.
choose like what to do. And just go to the next page.
Susie, I see you joined us. I don't know if you hear us or if you want to engage in this, otherwise we'll move on.
Yeah, I can.
Okay,
I was eating dinner, so I had my,
well, do what you got to do.
didn't want to eat in front of y'all. So I was deducing, because I missed the question, was it a book that, can you repeat the question? Was it something a book that engaged you or got you excited for reading? Is that?
Do you remember that influenced you as a kid?
Yeah, or an impact or influence, when you were younger.
Okay, impact or influence. I mean, I think, some, a series that got me into reading, because like John, I struggled with reading. I was a second language learner, so I always felt like, I never really mastered English, and so I struggled with that a bit. And so I never felt like a confident reader. And I was a slow reader. So, but the ones I really loved were those, the Wrinkle in Time, A Wind in the Door, Tilting Planet. So it was that series that kind of boosted my confidence, because for me they were so engaging. So being able to read them and get wrapped up in the storyline, and then the time would just go, and I wouldn't even realize how much time has passed or how involved I got with the book until hours would pass. So I think that series holds a special place in my heart, because I think it really turned me on to reading and built my confidence as a reader.
I love these stories of reluctant readers finding one book or one story and getting pulled in, and now look where you are. Thank you, and thank you for that specific icebreaker. Do you have a volunteer for next month?
I think I was supposed to do it last month, but I didn't make it. Sorry about that. So I can do it next.
Okay, thank you. The next topic is just wanting to keep the board informed and apprised of what the library's thinking is around sponsorships. John has some new information to share.
Yeah, so I just some movement, and I'll put this up here. Since Susie's on, for everyone to see it, but just a little background. There's not much here to look at, but there, with the library being a part of recreation and culture, so recreation and even museum, they have long histories of getting sponsorships to help support a lot of the programming and events they do. Libraries have done it too in their own way. Generally, it's in-kind sponsorships, like in summer reading, we get prizes from people that want to sponsor, and like maybe a coupon or whatever, right? But this is actually money sponsorship. And so my boss, the director of Recreation and Culture, wanted to broaden this to make sure the library was included in any potential sponsorship packages that the recreation staff who are well skilled in this already garner those kind of the things. So we are now a part of this when they kind of reach out and look for sponsorships. And so I'm bringing up the webpage within the recreation site specifically, so you can see opportunities here. And in the library, if you expand it, you can kind of see if you were to do a sponsorship package, and there's all kinds of things you can do, right? Like you could sponsor an event, you could sponsor broadly. For the library, I kept it very broad, right? I don't need a sponsorship on a specific program, although that could happen. I think particularly like a big author event, right? That's a great opportunity for a sponsor who could come in. So that's why I like the idea of being included in this. It's very new. There's not much that has happened yet, other than conversation. But I just wanted the board to know that this is a newer direction, and we'll see what happens with that. I think as a library, as a public library, we have to be, it's still a little different for how we approach this kind of thing, because we have to be careful of who sponsors and what are we committing to in their sponsorship. I mean, and there's different tiers, right? The rec staff are skilled in this, so they know, like, a lower tier might just be like a logo on your website or a program. Well, that's no problem. Like, we do that already. If it gets bigger, where they want space in an event, or they want to table something and share about their organization or business, that gets a little different for us, because at least if it's in the library, because then we get into different areas of the library, library law and things or even just legal stuff as far as free speech things. So if we have a sponsor that wants to promote themselves in the library, we can't just restrict it to them because they sponsored us. We have to let everyone come in. So it's just conversations we're having, and I'm only saying that just to let you know. I mean, I don't mind the idea, but when we as a public library, we have to be kind of careful about how we approach that in comparison to maybe other departments that certainly have a different revenue requirement. We have no revenue requirement as a library, but the Recreation and Museum have revenue requirements, and they get some of that through sponsorships, including other things like ticket sales, summer camp, registrations, all those things that people pay for that we don't do. So, as I joked about with the rec staff, as we were talking about this and introducing the concept, I said, let me just tell you now, the library is going to complicate everything about this, but we're happy to have sponsorship if it makes sense. So it's very new. There's really nothing that's out there yet. I just wanted to let you know this is there, particularly if you were to see it for yourself and wonder what the heck is this about. If we get any kind of interest in someone that wants to sponsor a package that includes the library, hopefully I have time to bring it here to inform the board of that and get some, thoughts or opinions on that. Or of course, I bring you my own, as I know to do. So anyway, that's kind of it on sponsorships. I'm certainly happy to entertain any questions or comments on that here. It's very new. It's really just conversations, but because things like this on the website have been published, I didn't want anyone to be surprised and wonder why the library is looking for money. Well, we're not necessarily, but it could be. It could be. It just depends what it is.
Does anyone have comments or questions at this moment? I'm glad to have that information shared here and to know that if there are significant developments, that we would hear about them.
Yeah.
I was also glad to see, like, kind of built into that language on the website. The first thing I think about is like some sort of selection criteria or just vetting that makes sure that the sponsor is aligned with the library's mission.
Yep.
And that's sort of implied in the language that was on there, in a very lovely, inviting way. It's saying, let us help you, let us help you show the community your commitment to education and literacy and cultural something. Cultural
Rigor.
enrichment.
Yes, yeah.
So, that's good. Okay, this next item is really a call for future topics from this board. As we look ahead into the rest of the spring and into summer, there aren't a tremendous number of sort of standing issues, like looking back on last year's agendas and so forth. Like there might be something here or there, certainly as we near June, but what are you wanting to see this board discuss? It could be a period, if nothing crazy pops up and demands our attention, it could be a period for this group to have some new conversations, to bring some new ideas for maybe looking into, doing some research, having a longer discussion. In other words, we have the luxury of thinking about what we want to focus on this coming year and how we want to engage with the community. And not so much we have to make a decision about this or we have to get input on that. There's a little bit more breadth in the agenda. So I am curious because we have an almost completely new configuration from this time last year.
Maybe this was discussed a little bit in the strategic plan. So, but I think the two things I'm most curious about is like the ongoing conversation about library funding, and if the board here can do anything to kind of affect that. And I think that could be an ongoing discussion and just like checking in and seeing if we have ideas or if there's anything we can do with Susie or going to council. And then the other thing is, I'm just curious if there's any kind of push for like the what was it, the bond or the bill or whatever, the thing that was trying to be pushed, what was it, like 2 years ago? If that's even a conversation anymore, or if that's just been dropped, if we're trying to do anything with that, could that be something that happens maybe more strategically in a different election year or something like that? So those are my open questions that I just don't know what I'm about and don't know if those could be an ongoing conversation.
I too, it seems like the thing that I've thought about most since my long tenure here is like, is around funding.
Yeah.
And the concept that we get so much of our money from the library, which is great. And, I volunteered two days at the book sale. And, but I just realized, how that is such a lot of work that they do, and it just concerns me about, because I don't know anything about the revenue, whether it's constant or whether it goes up and down, and so that's just something I'm really interested in. And then the other thing is just the whole idea of placement about bringing in kind of under recreational development. And, whether that's the best model, and it might very well be, or should the library be more than independent entity. Which is probably opening a can of worms, but those are just the two things I've been thinking about in my spare time.
Hands already open.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I've opened that can.
Yeah.
Well, you mentioned
Internally,
it.
yeah, and
yeah.
I've certainly, I brought it up here, so,
Yeah.
But it could be something we could support you on.
I completely agree.
Yeah, and maybe we could do some research about various models that other cities use,
Okay.
because there are a number of different ways that people with city support.
I think there was an awful lot of research and data collected several years back as part of that.
Or the feasibility.
Prior to that, the feasibility, they researched and communicated with boards and libraries in different similar markets or pulled data around libraries of similar sizes, serving similar populations. And so I think that there's probably a fair amount of information that is still true because it was kind of historical in nature. But then to pick that up and say, well, what is worth the time and energy of updating? And, that anybody who was around for that feasibility study, it was a specific moment and it was responding to, I believe, specific challenges that were kind of, I want to say like you had to be there, but that's not true. I feel like there were individuals who were on the board at that time who really felt that there were specific directions that the library should take or that the city should take. And so part of that information gathering was perhaps in the hopes of persuading the library and the city to pursue those specific avenues. Those may or may not be viable avenues for us in 2025. They may or may not be avenues that the library director and staff want to pick up and pursue in 2025. So,
Well, it would still
interesting.
be interesting to see the information they gathered from other cities and just look at it with fresh eyes, because obviously we weren't here.
You have fresh eyes.
Yeah, we have fresh eyes, because
Yeah.
I know there's just a number of ways that.
Well, and the library district was in place in Boulder County when they did that study. So
It was or it wasn't? Wasn't.
So,
Meaning the Boulder's library district?
Correct.
right, that was before the regulation.
Right.
and before all that. So,
It was the same election, actually.
yeah, it was the same election.
But you're right, it wasn't in place. But so in that study, I don't know if they draw on specific libraries, but certainly you can expect that at the time, the city of Boulder Public Library was considered in a, kind of,
Here.
well, yeah, like comparisons.
Benchmark.
Right, benchmarking, thank you, that's the word I was looking for, because it's, in Boulder County, it's the next sizable city to us at this point in time. So there's some pretty relevant things there that I think are still relevant. Now that they're a district, it doesn't change the size of the city, it's just that their governance is different, so.
The final was released in November of 2022, so I don't think it's that old. So yeah, maybe we just
No,
send it.
there's some relevant things in there, it's still on our website, I mean,
Yeah, Charlene and I just read it.
yeah.
Oh, is that the, okay.
The feasibility.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, when
Okay.
you both joined,
Yeah.
we were intentional about sharing it with you to make sure.
Yeah,
because it really did inform a lot of
Yeah.
the work this board did post or during and after that, and advocacy is, it kind of all circles back to that, and you know, the major things out of that were just pointing out that at the end of the day, after all 100 and whatever pages of that,
Yeah.
the library is too small for a city this size, and that means too small in both location and staffing. And, well, it's everything. It's everything. Not
Yeah.
just staffing. I mean, it's everything. Operational.
Space,
Yeah,
funding.
it's all of it.
The whole thing.
Yeah, I mean, this library was built to accommodate a population of 65,000 at most, and we're 106. So that's, in my mind, it may be oversimplifying it, but that's really what it showed. It gets into, of course, all that level of service, and preferred level, which is, you know, certainly where anyone would like to be, and that's how they kind of drew up that feasibility study. But and I think it's a good way to look at things. I think realistically we can look at that and say, okay, well, we could kind of probably be close to that, or maybe here, and still really provide a lot of value without asking for the entire world. Even though I would of course like to ask for the entire world, but I also like to be reasonable.
But we don't
We got lockers. Yep. So it's like a step in the right direction, and I think in part that if you kind of go back to that study and this board advocating to council and other people, you know, then fast forward to now, you have a concept that there was some funding for, that the council said, hey, we can do that, and that's going to really, I feel, spark growth at a low cost and really create some perspective and vision on the library for people that don't see us, even if it's a very simple concept. It's way bigger than the locker itself.
And I think Barbara brings up an excellent point / reminder that it doesn't have to be all or nothing all at once. This type of incremental growth is probably, I don't know, it's a more organic way of earning buy-in from the community because they see progress and then they support more progress, and it just expands from there instead of like, we want this, wouldn't it be amazing to have this great big shiny thing? It's like, well, that, I don't want to pay more taxes for that right now.
At the Friends meeting, speaking of incremental, when you were discussing the location where the locker is going to go, but then you mentioned that Harold, the city manager, had said that there is a big project happening over on the west side, and that would potentially in the future be an additional spot for a Dropbox. Do you want to join that?
No, I absolutely do. That's correct.
I even thought, why not so it sounded like there's going to be retail space in there. Why not saving one of the retail spots for a little library annex? My hometown library was so tiny, and it wasn't until high school. My mom used to drive 50 minutes to the nearest public library when I was a child. Once a week, she and a girlfriend would take us kids 50 minutes one direction to the library. And when I was in high school, my small town finally got its own library. The local Girl Scout troop had collected books for, a decade. And it was somebody who owned a Victorian house on Main Street that decided, you know what, I'll run the library, we can put it downstairs in my house. And it was amazing what they managed to do with that teeny tiny space, but it just made me think of this incremental, could they save one of the retail rooms?
Yeah.
And start there.
So there's a little history on that. So that housing development that is going to get built and where said locker will be, pickup locker. The initial discussion was to have a library annex there.
And a second rec center there too, as a complex.
And I think, I wasn't privy to conversations after, but it was really a budgetary, when they realized what costs would be and what they could do. And I provided them with operational costs for the library portion of that, and I gave them options for a staffed location, a self-service location. You know, but it wasn't viable at the time. So I think this is like the next best thing to have something new.
Yeah.
I still think that, you know, what the city manager offered from his fund was another locker, but I might, I mean, this gets a little off topic. It's not off topic, but I digress a little bit. I think a vending machine, it's like these cabinets where a browsable collection that's completely self-service. That way there's a collection there for kids and families to actually, they have their own little library and we'll get them cards and we'll do outreach there. We'll be there to help streamline that. I think that would almost be more valuable than a whole pickup location. And then maybe both.
Right.
But we'll talk about that.
You're right, that's the next incremental
But-
step.
but
But if
the
you look at
initial
like breaking it
conversation
down
with-
into incremental steps,
Yeah.
you know, like
Yeah.
maybe there was ways of kind of nudging the needle.
And any time that there's conversations that, and I can bend someone's ear on future library services that are not a $35 million, 35,000 square foot branch, it's like retail space. Like, we don't have to be huge.
Right, exactly.
It's just the right thing in the
To
right
whet somebody's
place.
appetite and
Oh,
see
my
like,
God.
wow, this is really handy.
Yeah, and even just on a smaller scale. I mean, the point is you have some collections, you can deliver programming to areas of town that don't have it. How much staff do you need? And I've delivered, and every year at budget season, I deliver that information. Just in case, you know, there's a way to do it outside of an election.
Yeah.
But in the future election, to get back to that point, I think if we were to do that, I would propose we really think about what's being put out there to taxpayers. They might fund something that's much more like, let's take this space,
Exactly.
even if it's, whether it's a lease or we buy a building but we have to renovate it. Think about the difference in a $35 million library as opposed to like maybe $5 million in a renovation. And then yes, you need operational costs on staffing and blah, blah, blah. It's still way less.
Mhm.
So I just feel like there might be an appetite for that if it's much more reasonable to people.
Right.
So I think those are good things to talk about, and I will always bring stuff to here that we can talk about. But that's, to me, is a good advocacy avenue for this board, is to continue down that growth aspect,
Mhm.
and that, you know, it doesn't have to be bad.
Right.
Sure, that was fun to look out and
Yeah.
dream about, but I don't know that we need to start there.
Right.
Do you remember the former North Boulder Library branch?
It's still there.
It's, yeah, but they've,
The little itty bitty
little
branch.
itty
Oh yeah,
bitty.
I know what
I
you're
haven't
talking about.
been there in a while.
It may not be there because of the new North branch. You're right, because they're basically neighbors. But
Yeah.
Yeah, you're probably right. It was a very little retail space.
Yes.
Very little.
Yeah.
Very little.
I mean,
That was
actually,
my
this.
local library when I was there.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
I always just picked up holds anyway, so it was like so easy.
Well, and that was one of the
Yeah.
major services of that outlet.
Yeah.
Is a whole pickup location.
Very
And I think
interesting.
they got it right. Like,
Yeah.
you know, you don't need a huge space. It's pickup holds, but they did do programming there, and they provided a service to people on that end of town. And that north branch, the huge north branch that was built, of course, that's pre-district, right? And my point is that that little branch, I think, helped solidify to Boulder, the city of Boulder, that they needed a bigger branch there.
Right.
And that was decided, and then the district happened. So the city already and the citizens decided that that was the right growth. But I think because they started with that little corner thing, yeah, I think you're right.
That had to have been less than 5 million, the little one,
I can't imagine.
in a retail.
And I don't know
Yeah,
what
in a
it
retail
started out
space,
as. Like, I don't know how much work they had put into it.
It just,
I
yes.
mean, you know,
A little retail
especially,
space would not
especially
be much work at all.
place on 17th and over, is gonna be brand new, so any retail space is gonna be at least decent.
Yeah,
Put some
I know.
shelves in and stuff.
I know.
So,
I was hopeful for
I
that.
wanted to add some, John, I'm sorry, I had my hand up, but I don't, you guys were looking.
Sorry.
So, I wanted to add some clarity on the ascent, so that, those apartments that we're building out there, those are part of the Longmont Housing Authority, and it is being funded for affordable housing. The space on the bottom, and this was really tricky, with as far as getting grants and, being able to acquire some federal dollars for this. It was very specific because it's under the housing authority, on how we can direct those funds, what we build there. We had looked at having a storefront library, but it wouldn't qualify for affordable housing.
It's nice to know that you guys looked at it.
What's that?
It's nice to know that you guys looked at it. Thank
Yes,
you. Thank
and
you.
so the other one was doing the preschool. So that one we'll be doing with Well Plum. So there'll be an intergovernmental agreement or a contract with us and Well Plum for that particular piece. So there won't be retail in that development. It will be housing and then the preschool area. Now, in conversations I've had with Harold in looking at that site for possibly having those vending machines. So like John was mentioning earlier about, once folks see the need and it was, oh yeah, we need something a little more than this. But it's just like a small move towards getting people more accustomed to using library services outside of their area, so they can still walk to those places. One of the things that I mentioned about to Sandy for the ballot measures, I really think if we do a library ballot measure, it should be by itself.
Yes.
It should not include other performing arts. Some people are going to get mad at me.
I agree with you.
But
This board won't.
okay. So, that would be something that I would advocate for, is that it's standalone. And possibly during a general election instead of an off municipal election, because of more participation, and the people who do typically tend to vote in those even year are more working class people, more families, more people who would possibly utilize library services.
So does that mean 2028? Is it, wait,
Or are we?
when's our next opportunity?
Yeah.
2028?
Yeah, it would be 2026 is too short, but I don't know, we create something happen. We have the framework for it.
Anything could happen between now.
Anything can happen, but yeah, you're right.
So, I appreciate that background, Susan. I'm glad I'm
Yeah.
sorry I didn't see your hand, but I'm glad you chimed in, because I knew there was a good reason why, with that housing development that the library was talked about and it didn't work, and I didn't really know, or I didn't remember why, so that's helpful to know. But having an opportunity to be there in some form, I think will be good. So,
And we'll measure it.
In terms of understanding where, like, locations that would be good for a storefront, like, are there, like, kind of areas of town where you're like, oh, these are the good locations that we want a storefront?
there's at least one specific location that because there's a vacant building there already.
Okay.
But it's in the right part of town. So in this housing development, it's basically around 17th and Hoover. It's on the east side. The housing development's on the east side. On the west side, where there's a Safeway and a shopping center, there's a vacant old bank building that's been vacant since 2018, something like that. That would be it's like right on the corner. It's highly populated, but generally, and I say that because it's vacant. I think what an opportunity to renovate a place like that, and it's like and that's bigger. It's not like storefront. Like that would be
That's a brand.
a solid branch, right? That we
Is this the bank?
Yeah, it's the old bank.
The drive-through.
Yes, and it has a drive-through, so we can keep the
That
drive-through.
would be.
Yeah,
Um,
there you go.
That's 17 and over.
Yeah,
But like, I guess the question that I
West
want,
side of Homer.
it's on the east side of Homer.
So it's looking like in the same party.
It's on the at kind of the corner of it, and yeah,
Like across, like Safeway is on one side of 17, and this bank is on the other side of 17.
no, they're both on the same side.
there is a same.
Safeway and, oh, what am I thinking
Okay,
of?
Sunflower Bank. Here we go. I'm paying attention to Susie. So the old Sunflower northeast corner of Homer and 17.
Drive up to the corner and the bank's on my right and Safeway's on my left.
Safeway's
Yeah,
on
right
the
there.
south.
That's a huge building.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's it.
Anyway, it's like a 2 or 3 story building. My point really is North Longmont. That's the cry out for library services. Long before I got here, even when this building was being renovated, way back in the 90s or somewhere in there, or built actually, they operated a satellite library in an old Safeway in North Longmont that doesn't exist anymore. And I met with the director at the time when I newly started here, and he was sharing about that. And even back then, he said the library could really benefit to be on that side of town, because when this was finished and they closed that north location, there was a huge community outcry. But please keep this open.
Yeah,
Oh, wow.
I bet.
And this is
I
back.
didn't
This
know
is
that.
25, 30 years ago. So that's why I say anywhere north. So that's why, even with the locker, Centennial Pool, still north of here, not maybe greatly north, but it's also the neighborhood and everything. It's in its
And
east.
there's a lot of new houses out there.
Yep. So I think that's generally where we need to be,
Okay.
and there's just it gets further and further out, right? And we're getting way out there where
Well, and then there's the whole southwest.
I mean it can really be anywhere in home, but
Yeah, I was gonna
think
say, I just didn't know if you had like there's like a heat map of like, here's where people are wanting it most. I don't know how you.
it's so a lot of it's what I think we know
Okay.
based off anecdotal or just any information we get. Part of, and it's kind of in that strategic plan, is to really gather better information about where specifically we need to grow based off demographics and what people are saying what they need or don't need, and really getting into like just neighborhoods, like what are who has library cards in those neighborhoods and who doesn't, and what are their interests, what are their shopping habits, like what can we tap into to get them to be library users. So there's a lot more work to do there, and that might identify areas we don't know about. I think it'll still identify North Longmont, but maybe in ways that we don't know, or maybe specific areas that we need to grow.
Would it be of interest to this board, it's a slight pivot, but to reach out to someone from the Boulder Library Board or staff and ask, how has it been since that, since they separated from the city of Boulder? Like what have the challenges been? What happened? Where did you not anticipate? How has it been received in the community? How has it made a positive impact on the community or the library's operations? I don't know if that would be
What's in the district?
Just Boulder.
their own district.
So they didn't evaluate Lafayette or?
Nope.
No.
Lafayette has its own, they're a municipal library like we are, so is
Yeah.
Louisville, so is Broomfield for that matter.
Right.
Okay, so basically they just changed the governance?
Correct.
But part of what
It'll
I
allow them to expand, so they're gonna build a branch in Gun Barrel, for sure. And I don't know what other growth they're talking about.
Well, they're reopening the Carnegie History Library.
Yeah.
They've added a director and staff and
And that's
that was.
and that's a matter of being a district and they have the funding now because they have
So we're.
by forming a district because it increased their
So they get their own, they have
They have
their
their
own
own
tax.
revenue. I have to state the obvious, they have a foundation. They have a
well,
foundation.
they've had that forever.
Yes, it's separate from their initiative.
Even as a
to have
city
district.
library and a city that is only, I think, what is it, over 150, 60,000 population? Maybe not even.
What,
I don't even think.
not in the
No.
summer?
I think
I don't think
they're
they're
like
very
1/5 of the population.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and so, you know, their budget as a city library was more than twice what we had. It was easily more. As a district, because now, you know, districts are largely based off property taxes, so like that's a
Oh,
win in
geez, yeah.
Boulder County.
Yeah.
So
Their
they're
houses
they're
are always
their
all
their
over.
their operating budget like went 2 or 3-fold just by being a district. So now with those things you're talking about, they just have the money to do it by the fact that they're a district. I want to be clear as the city library at Longmont, I'm not advocating for that, but that's the reality of a district.
Yeah.
I think the municipality could fund a library equivalent. It's just that the priorities have to be there.
As the city librarian, how would you convince us that it's not a good idea for Longmont to be cut?
There's
What's
other.
the downside, I guess?
Yeah. There are. So one is as a special district, you're autonomous, right? And there's good parts and there's bad parts about that. So you're responsible for everything.
Maintenance, lawyers,
Yep.
HR,
Marketing.
Everything that you can think of, you have to support. So as a city agency or department in our case, I rely on the city finance department and IT and HR. Like I don't have to have any of those internal. So even if as I say like older forms of district, they have more money, but they also now have to have their own HR department, their own IT department, blah blah blah. So
But
they
they were
still
also
come out a
probably
little ahead.
large enough and had more funding initially, so they probably had some of those things already focused on
They,
them, right?
maybe
You know what I mean? Like,
they might. You know, the bigger the library is, even if you're a municipality, you're going to have your own
right, that's what I mean.
operation. But here that wouldn't be the case. So there's that side effect in that sense. You know, you have to go back to the voters every so often to reinstitute that, whatever it's called, but to get that property tax, to keep it going. Otherwise, then you're nothing. So you rely on that vote. It's like once they vote once, it's not done. You have to go back every so often, and it doesn't cost any more at that point, right? Unless they are asking to raise the mill levy. But if they're maintaining it, there's no additional cost. So most people vote for it, but it's still a risk.
Some people that didn't want to re-up the revenue stream for the open space. You know, that
Right.
path, but for a while people
Right.
like, oh, well, you know, there's some debate about whether it is. But, you know, it's like you said, it's not all or nothing. It doesn't have to be this way, but it could be something where you're not competing with recreation and the museum. Like
Agreed.
we're in some kind of constant horse race.
Yep.
For the prize money.
Yeah, I think that for the importance of the library to this community and what I always call, and you see it strung throughout that strategic plan. I mean, the word essential is not lost on how many times it's repeated, which is very intentional because that's how I feel and that's how staff feel. And if you're essential, then you shouldn't be folded into another department, which makes you feel like a nice to have.
Right.
So that's for
Because-
sure where I'm coming from.
Because our
And I think that could
customers-
change a lot of things And, you know, it may change funding, but, you know, for sure, I mean, but I think that's a step in that direction.
I just think our customers are so much more broadly based, and there's a lot of people in the community that could surely benefit from recreation or maybe the library, but they really can access all the libraries. So literacy is just not the same as, you know,
Right.
a museum. I mean, it's just not.
No, I mean, that's what I've always argued is, like, or during, you know, currently is, it's not to say that people don't need recreation for wellness and everything that recreation provides, or a museum for culture, but the library is everything. We're that, we're education, we're literacy, we're also social service, right? It's like, so we can't
All
be,
the cities are-
there's nowhere to put us within the city structure, in my mind, that makes sense. Because as it stands in recreation and culture, I feel like we're just an added department to that division. You know, you could pull out cultural things. I still just don't know. Culture is an aspect of us, sure. We do programming, we do entertainment, we do cultural events, but that's just one portion. So when you're kind of everything, then just let us be everything and don't fold us into one area that defines us into this category that's only one component of what we do. That's what I would argue. That's what I do argue.
Then going back to your question, that's what I'd really like to see a focus on that. Because it intrigued me when you first mentioned it, and I would like to see that it's something we will look into and push forward.
I think that the support would be tremendous. You know, when it gets into details and where city council comes into that kind of thing or not, my general understanding or belief in that is it gets into kind of city operational, and that's city council's not going to get too involved in operational functions, right? So, you know, they're not going to really chime in on where the library should fall within city structure, but they can chime in on the essential nature of the library, which can help support that voice that I have, and maybe this sounds like this board would have to support that. So thank you.
So just to make sure that I capture your question or your request clearly, it's that this board look more deeply into
The placement of the library within the city structure, within the administration.
okay. We can do.
There will be some things that come up naturally, Jamie, as far as this topic goes. Like budget will come up probably starting next month, or at least in May. I'll start bringing budgetary things here, but I know that that's new. But I do like to keep that topic going when I'm in budget season and what I'm looking to ask for, and you know that way everyone here is aware, and that is definitely an advocacy thing when it comes to council and things like that. But
And as far as anybody in this conversation knows, does remaining within the city structure preclude the creation of a foundation? That can,
that's a whole different topic.
right, but are they mutually exclusive? Like,
Could you tell us what you're talking about?
so right now, the only entity that is able to raise funds on behalf of the library is the Friends of the Library as a 501c3.
Right.
We know, we're familiar with their good work. A lot of friends do the sorts of activities that our friends do. They have book sales, they sponsor programs, they solicit donations and offer memberships, and they generate revenue through those streams. They are, because of that scope, limited to some extent in what they can take in. They don't pay themselves salaries. Their sort of operational fees to exist are relatively low compared with the amount that they give to the library. A foundation, which I've experienced at larger size libraries, not larger than here, and which Boulder has had for a long time, is a more powerful way of raising funds. So there's usually people who only work for the foundation. There are development professionals. Our friends are run by very resourceful and creative volunteers with a wide range of backgrounds. But a foundation would be large enough and would be going after those large
Professional
donations. Professional fundraising, but also just larger fundraising. You're identifying and soliciting donors who are individuals who can give tens of thousands of dollars in one fell swoop. I personally have been curious what would be required for a library to create a foundation. Off the bat, it would be finding those key people who could lead the charge and do it out of their love for the library without remuneration, who have the time, who have some expertise or knowledge to be able to create a structure and pull in the right people. But potentially, and it wouldn't be an either or. You would still have your friends who would support programs and sort of value add type of initiatives. And then you would have a foundation for that forward-looking expansion, right? The friends right now, they're filling in an operational gap. A foundation would be able to raise money for like the next phase, like a capital campaign.
Oh, for sure to do capital. So like,
Yeah.
you know, like that's a good example. Like the museum's doing to raise capital for their expansion. A foundation could be an example of an organization that could raise funds for that.
But the museum is using the Friends of the Museum to do it, and because the Friends of the Longmont
Correct.
Library is a 501c3,
Technically,
they can raise funds.
if they have the right people.
Right. So they could hire somebody, but also, I mean, I have also seen children and youth staff apply for grants through their friends. So that, I mean, technically you could do that as well. And there are entities that do take requests from government organizations as well. It's not, there's lots of entities out there that would just, you don't even have to use the friends as a middleman.
Right.
I think personally that a foundation is redundant. And that would be my concern about it.
Redundant in what way?
Because the avenue already exists to do all the fundraising.
I could see it both ways. So I think if our existing friends of the library have the resources and the right people to have that sort of foundational support outside what they're doing, which is largely book sales and membership, I don't disagree with you. There's plenty of libraries that have both the friends of the library that do that and the foundation that is the fundraising arm.
Mm-hmm.
All they do is raise funds through different avenues for bigger projects or things. So I agree with you.
Mm-hmm.
I could see it both ways, but
But currently the Friends doesn't have an infrastructure.
well, currently they don't, and I think that's They know what they know. The group there knows what they know. So if they have the right people there, I think it could service both. But I just don't know if that's there.
Does staff ever write grants
There's been
Either-
only a few.
either to foundations that accept government requests or through the friends?
there hasn't been many. There hasn't been any since I've been here. Not like a new grant written. I mean, we've received our state grant to libraries every year, but that's a different thing. It's the LSTA that but there's been a couple grants written. Like there was a staff member before I even got here wrote a grant that actually funded electric car charging ports in the garage. So a little unrelated, but it was helpful. But there's some things. But you're right. And when I was in California, we wrote almost all our grants through the Friends. Because we didn't have a foundation there either. And that was a huge library system. But each library, or many of the libraries, had their own friends of that branch library, and we wrote many grants through them that didn't take government grants. So, but we haven't done too much of that. I think that's something certainly to explore for different projects, but a lot of the initiatives we have require ongoing funding, and so that's what's hard with grants is it's a one-time. And but I think there can be benefits too. So when I was in California, there was a huge grant we wrote to get social workers and then like 3 of the branches to provide social services that were highly needed. And the goal there was to show the need for that so that there might be funding from the county to support social workers. So, you kind of work towards showing what's needed, and you can do that through a grant. So, I see it obviously in a lot of different ways. I would say currently with the makeup of the friends that are there and what they know and what they do, if someone were to come in today and say, I'm starting a foundation because we need more, I don't think it would conflict.
No.
Because they're doing what they're doing and the foundation will do what they're doing in its current state.
The Friends are, as you know, they're in the middle of a complete regime change,
Yeah,
new
that's true.
leadership,
Yeah.
new structuring, nothing's written down. There's no manuals or procedures.
They're in rough draft stage, actually.
Yeah, but they're
Yeah.
being generated now.
Yeah.
Right? I spent
Yeah.
8 hours talking to Lois and Sharon on Saturday. And the amount of stuff that they're uncovering and blowing the dust off of and trying to source and pull together, having to cancel the May sale in part because of a lack of support and resources. They've had such turnover. They are trying to recruit new volunteers and get some new energy, not just in the board, but like really clarify the structures of their volunteering to make it, remove barriers for people to volunteer and help out. But all of their energy is going to just sustaining themselves into the future. We got to figure out how we can keep doing what we've been doing so that we can continue to give at or above the level we've been given. And to put something like raising money for anything else feels like such a burden. At this time, I wouldn't ask them for one thing more than what they're doing right now. And that feels, it has felt precarious looking from the outside to see how much the library relies on the Friends for operations, for programs, and that it would take so little for that system to buckle, that structure to buckle right now, because they don't have the infrastructure solidified yet. So I think, we have to explore other avenues for bringing in significant amounts of money. They have all kinds of creative ideas of how to bring in more money, more community partnerships to grow the Friends, more memberships from the community. But when we talk about needing a new building for a different space and this sort of capital campaign level ideas, I think we need more than that. We need something, a different mechanism, not instead of, but in addition to. Hopefully this can be a space where we bring in and discuss all kinds of ideas. If there are other creative out-of-the-box possibilities for generating revenue, like even through elections or, does it have to be taxes? Is there any other way that libraries get funded? What are those things?
Well, the general fund, which is taxes, but then we obviously friends, foundations, grants is one avenue, and then
I feel like the grant landscape is crazy right now, and about to get crazier as more and more.
Well, and that's very
federal
unsettling,
funding.
which
What's that?
we'll kind of get into
we're
here.
going
But I
to,
think
Is that a
but
segue?
it's
We can
embedded.
flip flop.
It's embedded, but I just mean, when we get into grants and there's not a lot in library land in Colorado as far as like state or local grant funding. A lot of it comes from federal, the LSTA, IMLS, and that's a real risk right now.
Yeah.
So, I would never put all my cards in that. But I also try to balance out, before I was here, that directorship I had in California, we were like so held in the grant fund that, it almost became like a part of our operational. Like, and if we didn't get the grants, we just didn't do those things. So I don't want to set precedent either. Like, it needs to just be funded. We will do grants for the additional things that I think will help supplement what we're doing. So it's in my mind a little bit of a balance. I
Well,
don't
can we
want
just make funding then another one of our overall topics?
I think you're right. I think it's always there, but we might as well just say it out loud.
Well, it's focused, you asked us what we were interested in.
Oh, no, for sure.
Immediately, we all did. I'm just saying, it's totally, the thing we all jumped in and said was, funding, so.
Are there any roles, either within the library or the city, the community, anybody that we could invite to come and chat with us, present to us?
I like your idea of just talking to somebody from Boulder, just because they're there, they've done it, they're sexy, they're, hip hop happening.
We'll be addressing that, Susie,
Being
in
sexy
the
and hip hop
reports and
happening.
updates. I'm sorry, but for those of you that didn't look at the screen, she made a comment on iOS, but that's something that offline Jamie and I talked about that we needed to address, and I have a bit of information to share, but not to jump ahead. But thank you, Susie. You're right. Yeah.
Well, I've captured where the library falls in city structure and the funding as sort of the top topics to dig into.
Also, if we are thinking about a 2028 ballot measure, that should probably be a regular thing that we talk about.
That's true. Kind of get ahead.
Otherwise,
right?
all of a sudden, it'll be 2027. So,
Well, actually, that's a really good point because,
It was rushed last.
it was
Yeah.
rushed. And so when you think about advocacy for that and campaigning, you can campaign as long as it's not referred to the ballot, right? Like, there's rules about that as the board, as we learned, and as me as a city employee. But before that, because you all have all the time in the world, outside of here, you can be knocking on doors, handing out pamphlets like a year ahead.
So
Right.
that is a good segue.
It is a good
Thanks.
segue.
Thanks, John.
Yeah,
We
just.
almost planned this. So this question about community engagement, one of the things that this board hasn't done in a while, hasn't really done too much of since I joined, was is community engagement, actually going out into the community with your board member hat on and talking to people, finding out needs, educating them, informing them, making sure that they have the talking points that they need with their friends and family, getting questions, having that dialogue with the public. And so I don't know if there are ideas in this group or suggestions how to bring some form to that. What do we have the capacity to do and the will to do? What do we have the time to do? Is it electronic? Do we survey people? It's just sort of an open question. How can we have that conversation with Longmont residents?
Well, I kind of was thinking about this and just trying to jot down some questions. So, first of all, it seems like we should have some kind of clarity about what are the goals of community engagement.
Mm-hmm.
What are we trying to accomplish? I mean, are we just trying to get more people to come into the library, more visits to the library, visits from people who don't usually come? And how do we measure that kind of thing? Do we just want more of our materials to circulate? I mean, there's just a lot of... I'm kind of feeling that the community engagement thing is just so vague that I don't know how to address what it is we're trying to do.
My feeling is, because money, is bringing more community awareness of all the other services that the library provides, like the Rivers program, like the libraries. Because when I talk to people, they think the library is just checking out books, and then we start talking about, computer skills and job applications, and, it's a place for the city to, educate people from services, and people always go, wow, well, I'm really interested in that. Whereas I think for the library, the referendum, it was more like people like, well, there's already books. So to me, it's engaging about services that the library provides.
Yeah, I would say that, to answer your question, when you started going into, is it checkouts? And the answer is yes. But I think I would couch everything under advocating for and showing the essential need of this library. And how is that done? So it's not necessarily through attendance and programs or how many books we check out, right? Those numbers we're going to have every year.
Yeah.
And so some of it we are talking about internally as far as getting data after certain programs, and it's through surveying and things. The library will do that to really gauge the outcome of what someone benefited from attending a program. So you get into like computer or digital literacy. Did someone get a job because they attended one of our classes? And those are the things I want to be able to present. That I think when I talk about that kind of thing, that's what I want to try and get across to people. That it's truly critical for so many people that rely on us for different things, and that so many people don't see or only see it as a place to occasionally show up and have a place to read or check out a book. It's to I would argue probably a quarter of the population relies on us for something. Relies on us, not just So that's.
But when you go out and you're talking to people about what the library does, I kind of feel like people are going to say, well, so what? Why are you talking to me about this? Certainly you do it, but if you're going to have a ballot measure, you say, this is why we have this on here, and here's why we think we need this. But absent that, it's kind of, I don't know how to
I think
express
I
it. It's
understand.
just kind of vague, and I would feel very uncomfortable just approaching people and saying, well, look at all the stuff we do, and they say, why, John?
I think it's actually, I think that relationship might be a little bit reverse of how I'm thinking of community engagement. Because
Okay.
I think of the role of this board is we are representing the community, and we're representing it to the city and maybe here to John, right? And so I think the way I think of it is when I talk to people about the library, I'm curious what they have questions about, what they have concerns about, what they want more of, and how we can bring that to council and be like, hey, look, we've talked to maybe we've talked to whatever it is, 100 concerned citizens about X topic, right? And so I think it's more of a less of, I don't think we're the marketing team for the library. I think we're more of the information gathering about these kinds of things so that we can, plan future projects or ballot initiatives or whatever based on those questions. So I'm constantly talking about the library to people, and I feel like what I have often is people are not necessarily looking for what kinds of things can the library offer me, but they're more like, hey, I need this thing. I wish the library had this thing, or I'm confused about what's going on with this thing in the library. And then usually I'm like, I have no idea, and I bring it up at the next meeting. I think that's the kind of thing that is more, and so when we're talking about what kind of things we do, I think some kind of digital survey to start out and just be what kinds of things what do people know about the library?
I think it's a good place to start.
Yeah.
Just to get a pulse of maybe we're not going to get an amazing sample of people who are going to respond to this, right? But I think will give us a direction of being okay, here's a gap that we can identify. Here's the questions people have, and that might give us a good sense of where to go from there in terms of more community engagement. Does that make sense in terms of?
Yeah, it does. I'm an introvert. I don't talk to people. So, except in my tiny little groups that I belong to. So,
but those
I
people,
have a
those
hard
people
time.
might still have questions.
And they may
about
talk to
the
somebody
library,
else.
right?
yeah.
That's
And that's
still a
the point of the
population.
question of how to engage,
How to
because
engage, yeah.
depending on what it is what our goal is, right?
Yeah.
In-person, one-on-one conversations might not be as effective as, if we have the ability. I have a question, who has the authority, or who's the appropriate entity to survey the public about library engagement? Is it the library? Is it the city? Can we do it? Can we support it? Right? Even to ask from a drop down or an open-ended question what are the ways in which the library has, which of the following essential services have you benefited from in the past 5 years, and then list all of those things, because it does double duty. You're asking them, but you're also telling
You're showing
them if they
them,
didn't know
I
that
didn't know
already.
you had those. Yeah.
Oh gosh, I could have been taking advantage of this for the last 3 years.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think about that.
I guess, John, is that something that, are you interested in that information for the library? Is that something that we could do?
I think, yeah, I don't see why not. I mean, we'll do our some of our own internally, but some of what you're talking about, I think it'd be good. I don't know. I mean, off the top of my head, I'm thinking when we're kind of thinking of asking the community for input, it'd be good to not always have it come from the library or the city, have it come from your neighbors, which is you on the board. So I think there could be some real benefit in that.
We could even potentially collaborate with the funds, because if we
Right.
wanted to hire a consultant or an outside entity, if there was any cost associated, they might be able to fund that, because we would both of our bodies would benefit from the data, having that data kind of direct our work.
I also think though, if we're just trying to get a pulse, it could be a Google form. But I'm curious, could you throw a Google form up on the library website or something like that, or would that be?
Well, I mean, we survey, I mean, I guess we do it for programs, right? Like after the fact or whatever. So I guess we do it. So yeah, I don't see what, I mean, I might have to ask just to make sure.
I think people get really tired of being asked.
Well, that's true. You gotta be
surveys.
careful about that, yeah.
No, I mean, something really simple, just a couple questions, but a real survey, that, because they have to do the questions in a certain way. So,
Right.
all that kind of stuff. And then the survey ends up being 25 questions and I get tired of it after about 5. And I say,
Keep it pretty short,
Short.
pretty focused, incentivize it.
yeah,
But you'll be entered into a drawing doing something.
Yeah.
Figure out some sort of
but it's
motivation.
gotta be short. And it's gotta be, I don't want number rankings.
No.
On a scale of.
I know, it's
Easy, short,
easy, short, open-ended,
You'll
relatively
be entered
quick.
into a drawing for 5 minutes of public comment at the next one.
Don't all fight.
Okay, maybe we can think broader than that.
Yeah.
I think there's some opportunities for that.
Yeah.
I mean, we may not figure it out right in this moment, but.
Right.
Yeah. Oh, how about 5 books from the Friends bookstore out there, or something like that. Your choice.
Oh, that's
So
cute.
all
Yeah,
sleep
that's a
on
good
it.
idea.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we'll bring it back in another meeting and like add some more ideas to it.
Well, the other idea that I was thinking about, and I think maybe we mentioned this, is all the festivals that the city has.
Yes.
Where people have booths with different
Yes, yeah.
organizations.
And I think I can help with that because we've been talking, I mean, the library has certainly had a presence at a lot of events. And we've been talking, and it's sort of funny, as I talk about the library being its own department, but when it comes to events, we've been talking as a recreation and culture department of collaborating on these things. It's like, we'd be at like Cinco de Mayo, right? The library has a booth, the museum has a booth. It's like, why are we all over the place? Like, we should just collaborate and be in one. So I have two sets of minds
Well, you
there.
can do that regardless. I
You can
mean,
do it regardless.
yeah, I mean, I share booths with key
Yeah, it's a matter of
collaborators
cost
at Meals
savings
on
and
Wheels.
it's
I mean,
like,
yeah. You can,
So it's not, you're right, it's not mutually exclusive, right? But it's, but my point is, when those things come up, it's certainly an ask of additional time, but to have board members,
Well, that's what I was thinking.
those things would be huge.
You don't want to overburden your staff and having to staff that in addition to all the other stuff.
No, having board members of those things would be
Yeah.
a lot. So I can always make sure to bring this forward here when we have things coming up that I know we're going
And,
to.
and give us information and
Yeah,
pictures and
exactly.
stuff like that.
Yeah.
Get name tags so they're official.
Yeah. You can.
I have one.
I think we could probably get some that just have your name that says library board member. Because they're not that expensive.
That's good.
I mean, we
At
have like,
home.
I'm not
They're,
very Yeah, they're nice little things that, anyway, we're really getting into the
I
weeds.
do want us to move on. I'm mindful of the time.
Can
Yeah.
we follow up on that next month?
Yes, yes. I have a little list over here of the things that are coming back around. But this is what I wanted it to be, all the popcorning. And then now we can put in sort of like a sequence. So thank you to everyone for being so helpful tonight. The membership and future recruiting piece does not have to be a big agenda item tonight. It was mostly to what? To say that everyone's term on the board has an expiration date and they're all like different. And so this board came up in the city system as it will have a vacancy or more vacant, just one in June. June?
Yes, I do.
At the end of June. And that is because my first term is coming to an end. And so there is the ability for me to reapply, to renew, because you can have 2 consecutive terms, and then you have to rotate off for a year. It is my intention to reapply for that vacancy, but it is
Please do.
also open, just because you don't want to leave the meetings, introvert.
Yes, exactly. But because the rest of us are so new,
Yeah.
it really helps to have somebody with the history.
I don't want to step away. Yeah, I don't feel ready to step away. I could potentially be persuaded to reconsider the chair, but I do want to be a part of this board, so I will be reapplying. But that vacancy is open for other applicants as well, and I don't know much about the city's process and how they figure that out. Like,
It would still be through the same process of
Yeah.
reviewing
Yeah.
whatever applicants we get, and then that again is the board's recommendation to council.
okay, this is my first time going through this. So.
Katie, you're in your second term?
No, first.
You're in your first, okay, you're okay.
And we're in shortened terms though, because we took over somebody else's
Correct.
seat. When, could you tell us when our, I mean, no one ever told me when my term ends. Did someone find that out in time?
Yeah.
Okay. It'd be nice to know. Because I didn't really even realize that I was filling, that it was a short-term appointment until you guys
Because
told
you
me.
were filling the vacancy.
Yeah.
Or, and it was a vacancy that ended early, that's why.
So
I'm guessing Tracy's looking at that now, but anyway, if it's not tonight, you will be there.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can make that tell you.
Okay. That'd be great.
Um,
So I can plan for the next few weeks.
It's tonight, thank you for your service.
I think it's after June.
Yeah, I mean, it can't be tonight, that's a joke.
And then the future recruiting piece, I think we'll just save for a future date, which is just, where do we see our role in recruiting? Because right now, it's primarily a posting that goes out through the city and is on the city website. And the library board does not really hasn't done a whole lot to actively recruit members or to have a shared vision for a recruiting strategy. So that would be, how do we make this board the most representative of the population as we can, right? We can't control who's interested in being on the board and what they bring, but we do know that we have a very diverse population in Longmont, and that is not reflected on this board, as lovely as we are. So we can come back to that.
So just to give context really quick, most members on the board currently, their terms end June 30th of next year, 2026,
Oh,
besides Nicole. So yours is actually later than that, so.
Bye, guys. Those terms end June 26th, and Nicole's is up in June 27th. But everyone on the board is eligible for a second term. Okay. Thanks. Now you know.
Y'all should please stay for a second term.
Nicole's like, oh, wait a minute, I might be the
Hold on.
lone board.
I kind of feel like a year is just enough time to figure out what's going on.
Right.
Yeah, exactly, that's
Right.
fine.
So, yeah, there's so much.
If we want momentum,
Yeah.
we gotta stick around. Let's move on to reports and information items, because I thought this was going to be a category. Or a slimmer category.
Well, so the main report information is really on in what Susie wrote about in the chat. I wanted to just bring forward it, and I had I gave you a couple of different articles from the state library on IMLS and LSTA grant funding. But with the very recent White House communication of basically stripping away funding from IMLS, which is was a threat in the previous administration, by the way. It just never happened, thankfully. But here we are again. And I certainly get questions from staff and others like, well, what does that mean for this library? And so I just wanted to share at least what I know. The handouts are more about what does IMLS and LSTA do and stuff like that, and I think you can look at that. And in the minutes, when we get them, there will be some links to follow if you're inclined. Some of them are advocacy. You can sign up to kind of advocate or write to your congressperson to say this is not right, to defund that, basically, plus some other information, plus the content itself. And every library, which is a library advocacy group, a nonprofit group that supports libraries nationwide, they have, which will be in the minutes too, it's basically a kind of a page within their site that kind of explains all this, what does it mean, how would it affect libraries. So it's a little bit more getting out of the language that's there. So, as a municipal library, we are funded through the city's general fund, right, which is in large part through the general fund, and then we get, of course, additional through Friends and other charitable, but that's it. The general fund is only through sales, use tax, and property tax. So we do not rely on federal funding to operate this library. And that being said, there are many things that we rely on that federal funding has impacts on. So, so the state library, for sure, and that's probably 75% federal funding. And if that were to go away, we would more or less lose the state library. Now, what does the state library do? A million things, and some of them which our patrons rely on. So they have, well, first of all, they do a lot of training for library staff. They're very well known for the state's talking book library for here and here. It's an extremely important resource that we refer patrons to. The Colorado Library Consortium, which is sort of a pseudo-state agency, so they kind of get federal funding. And the reason that's important is because they are responsible for the statewide courier system of how library materials are transported back and forth. So this could really impact that, and where our consortial borrowing through Prospector, as you may know it, and all the delivery of materials, I mean, that could be impacted or go away, and unless it's funded some other way. So that means more materials resource sharing. It basically, that's what it is, right?
Wow.
I mean, so it starts to get exponential. We do, as a library, rely on one of the grants, so the state grant to library, which I think I mentioned earlier on. That's been an LSTA grant that the state library has received for us on our behalf. It's a very easy grant process. I kind of have to just raise my hand and say I still want funding, which is like the easiest grant you could ever, it's like you kind of answer yes, and then you give money. It's like, I don't know any other grant like that, but this one is, and because of the way it was set up, and so any public library is eligible, and then they base the funding off of your service population and how many people said they wanted funding. What it does is it helps supplement our collections. So we use it in large part for a couple of our different ancestry type databases that are hugely expensive, so we can't get it without that LSTA grant. We do a lot of children's support through Wonder Books and other more expensive children's collections, playaways, like more of the digital /book collection that we have. come through there. Our online tutoring database, tutor.com, is LSTA grant funded. So there are impacts that could directly impact us in that sense that without funding, those would just all go away. So expanded collections, tutor.com and Ancestry, and things that people really use and rely on. So I wanted to talk about that. The state librarian wrote to all the directors this morning about this because there was, some questions and confusion about the executive order as it stands. And basically I wanted to repeat some of this. So basically it directs multiple federal agencies, including MLS, to reduce functions outside the scope of what is statutorily required. And that's important because the LSTA grant, so the state grant to libraries that I just talked about, and some other federal funding that we get is statutorily required, and the executive order doesn't include that. So as it stands, those wouldn't be included in losing funding. I just wouldn't rely on a whole lot of what's said right now, if I'm being honest.
Yeah.
So I think, and even our state librarian expressed caution. The state librarian is in a very weird position. They can't lobby for libraries as the state librarian. Very strange. They can't take a stance. She can't take a stance. So, very strange. All she can do is present information about libraries. And so, but the most that she said is, we'll have to wait and see what happens, and that there's a lot of legal people looking into that because things can change and things get shifted, but that's where it stands now. Gosh. Any questions? No? Good. Okay. So, I mean, I just, I did update staff on this today. I just think it's important as much as we can to keep people informed of these things coming forward. Personally, I'm not surprised this is here now. I mean, I anticipated something like this with IMLS. Everyone's been talking about it, so here it is, unfortunately. But we'll see. Again, when you get into the statutory things that are required by law, and the way the executive order was written, it does not include those statutory things, but that could change at any time, probably. And this may not ever get through if there's enough advocacy to go against it. So in the minutes, you'll see some links where you can express your desire that does not lose funding because of how important it is. For many other libraries, it's heavily reliant on federal funding. So you can see a lot of library services disappear, some of which could impact us. Right? So.
What I'm hearing is that if it hits the fan, we would potentially have an even greater funding need as Longmont.
You would, as would a lot of municipalities and even districts, because even the districts rely on the state courier, right? Now they may have more funding than we do to help supplement something. We just don't have money sitting around, in that sense. But it's very real to everybody. So yeah. So stay aware of it anyway. Again, you'll see in the minutes plus what I sent you or what I printed out for you to have in that sense. Yeah, and then I don't know if there's much more on that particular thing.
It's kind of just a informed.
Yeah.
Heads up.
One thing that we did discuss last month, which is a bill that's still sitting in the House on basically removing ads and links from databases. That's still sitting there. I keep looking for updates on where it's at in the House. It made it through committee, unfortunately, so it's sitting there and waiting to be addressed and then get voted on. I've encouraged staff to write their congressperson on that. I would certainly encourage the board to do that. That's like I said last month. I mean, I don't know how else to say it. It's a censorship bill. That's my opinion. Okay, just want to be clear. You might see it. Someone might see it differently, but it's when we want to have restrictions in place on databases of ads that can't be any ad, can't be there or any link that links to the outside. That's so many things that effectively will remove any research databases from access from students.
So
Or
if we contacted
Yeah.
our congressperson, can we say we're on the board?
Oh, yeah.
Or is it only as a concerned citizen?
No, you can say.
Can you remember the bill number?
1158. I think that's what it is. Let me see.
I think it's up in the
It's in the minutes.
It is, yeah. So, but anyway, that's still being discussed. So there's also, and this is also going to be the minutes, but one of the links there is there's a one day a year where library folks and library supporters go to the state capitol. This happens to be on March 26th. It's called Library Advocacy Day at the Capitol, and it's an opportunity, I think, to meet with legislators and talk about all things libraries. And anyone can come to that. It's at the Capitol, and it's like 8 in the morning on a Wednesday. I'm sure that works into everyone's schedule. I'm trying to figure out mine so I can maybe be there. I haven't really done a lot of that kind of stuff, but at this point in time, I feel like the more people that are there, even just, you don't even have to do anything but just be there.
Mm-hmm.
So they see a lot of people present that are saying, hey, none of this stuff's right. The bills aren't right that's there, and the federal stuff isn't right.
Attended advocacy, what is it? Gosh, lobby day. I've attended a lobby day.
Yeah, that's what it is.
In Denver, and what some of the people I work with didn't realize is that lobby day is a funny thing when the legislation is in session, because it means that your senators and representatives are by and large not available, they're not accessible, they're on the floor, they're in session. So you either have to kind of like find their office, find their aides or their staff, and get a message to them, or talk to them, or sometimes there's, I forget the name of the person, but there's a role, the people who stand outside of the House and the Senate chambers, and they run messages back and forth to the different legislators, so you could get a message to your representative and say, hey, I want to talk to you about this, and then when they have breaks, hope that they come and meet you and they don't run the other way, because that's the other thing, depending on who you're trying to talk to. If they know what you're there to talk to them about, they may or may not be enthusiastic about coming out and making time with you. So if you do want to go to that event on the 26th, I would strongly recommend reaching out to the offices of your representatives and trying to get something scheduled, finding out. I don't know if you'll get a response in a timely way, but you might. They might get back to you and say, I'm sorry, this person is, in session all day. You're going to have to find 5 or 10 minutes when you're on break, and to take your chances. But there is also the impact of just being there and being visible and talking to whoever you can talk to and networking with the other people who are there doing the same thing.
So that was all. I just wanted to
That was your director's report.
pretty much.
Do we want, do you have anything, either council member Hidalgo Faring, or our friends liaison?
I do, but I can pause and let Susie go, and we can look back at friend stuff next month.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so real quick, I was at the state capitol last Thursday for lobby day for the educators, so with St. Fern Valley Education Association. And I did hear, because I was asking about that House Bill 1158, and it sounds like they've watered it down a great deal. So it's almost like it's not really going to have, there's not a lot of teeth to it. When I spoke with the Colorado Education Association lobbyists, they were pretty sure that it might end up just getting dropped. But regardless, that was one of the things that I mentioned to, I spoke with Senator Mobley, Senator Marchman, Representative McCormick, and our new rep for the Erie, Dan Boog, and had a chance to chat with them. You know, no more unfunded mandates. You know, if you want to fund education, don't put all these, you know, criterias and building these laws without, you know, because the impacts of that, of like that particular bill, who's going to have oversight on that? Who's, you know, that would come back to the districts. So again, it costs money. So, you know, if you really want to know what's the best laws, talk to us. Let's work on something together. I know that there's some charter school bills out there that would kind of give a pass to getting a lot more construction on charter schools, but then it's pulling away from public ed money. And who are the kids that benefit from public ed? Students with disabilities, students in poverty, you know, so I'm concerned that there's going to be some inequity. Not watching it closely. There is April 6th, I believe it was, is our life skills fair at the Boulder. It's Sunday. Yep, it is the 6th from 11 to 4. The life skills fair, that is for, primarily for youth, so middle school, high school kids. I know we'll have some venues for elementary school age kids with their parents. I'll be having a sewing station with some sewing ladies. And then the other thing that, John, I guess we could talk about this offline as well. I was approached by Marta Moreno, who does the Dia de los Muertos altars at the museum. Well, with construction at the museum, that's no longer going to be a possibility this fall. So I was wondering if, you know, I'm thinking about in the library, that, you know, you have people enter in and, you know, utilizing that space. And that might be a great opportunity for community engagement. You get people maybe who typically wouldn't come to the library, getting them through the doors, and, you know, there might be an opportunity for collaboration there.
Let's talk about that. We've had one of those banners that we've had.
The Katrina.
What is it?
The Katrina, like artwork. That
Yeah. But the altars you're talking about, at least what I saw at the museum, I mean, it'd be interesting to talk about what I saw there. At least the sheer amount of stuff, it would have to be scaled down.
Yeah.
But I think I also saw something unusual. I don't know if it's always been that big. So, because some of them were huge. I mean, it would take up the entire first floor.
Yeah.
But I love the idea of that, by the way. So.
Well, I've had altars. I've made altars for my mom there. And, you know, one year it was really big. The other one I had more scaled down. So, I mean, we can look at space and see if that's a possibility.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. And that was all I had.
Okay.
Katie,
I mean, it's 9. Do you want me to
Yes.
go now? Or wait till next one?
it's up to you.
My schedule accommodates. Yeah, so Friends of the Longmont Library. We've discussed some things. They are going through a lot of turnover and they're working on codifying their roles. One of the new roles that they will have is a volunteer coordinator position, which they've never specifically had that. They are looking to hire as well, and they is it posted yet? Do you know the position that they were hiring for? The web manager slash
don't know.
marketing.
I
We'll
don't
see.
know.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
mean, they're one of the members. There's someone that's at least
Yeah, there's
doing
somebody
the
who's doing it
interim,
right now and is kind of being
Yeah.
paid for
I don't know
on
where they're at with it.
on a contractual basis
Probably
right
find
now.
out the next board meeting.
But yeah, they are looking then to replace her. She's kind of doing it as an interim basis, and they are looking to have an actual position there. And then like some additional volunteer positions, they're trying to recruit for a book manager, a book sale manager, and a warehouse manager. They approved for a 3D printer to come to the library, in addition to approving, you know, the kiosk, they have, the locker, they have also approved for a 3D printer. So that's really exciting. Seed Library is underway right now. They approved for the summer reading program to be back in full force this summer. And then they want to, same way we've talked about presence here, they want to do a better job at having presence at events, starting with the library events. So when the library goes to the pool to launch the summer program, they want to start having friends there as well as a way of recruiting more friends. So those are big things, down and dirty.
And they had some success at the garden fair. They kind of did it. They kind of wrangled it in quickly. And they're like, we should be there. So they set up a table. They sold a number of memberships. They rounded up some gardening books and sold them all. And they had to keep going back down to get more.
And they didn't even have a credit card kiosk with them.
Yeah.
And they still managed to like take IOUs and or checks or cash and things like that. So they were so surprised by how well it went that they want to expand it and credit card machine when they do it.
Yeah. But anyway, it's good. So those efforts,
Thank
I think,
you.
will be beneficial.
And thank you
Yeah.
for going to that meeting.
Yeah, it was a whirlwind because they did so much so fast because they are in this period of extreme transition, and they seem quite motivated about that right now.
It's exciting. It is exciting. The sale I heard went really well, and you know, for the amount of time that I was sitting at the cash register, iPads, there were so many people who came up and they knew who the friends were. They were thanking us. They were putting extra money in the donations jar, and I think I've been at every sale for the past 2 years at least, and that has increased. And so the frequency that was happening on Saturday was greater than any other sale that I volunteered at.
Oh, awesome.
So back to that incremental change and that traction, like it is, the message is getting out there, and I think a large part of that is due to the friends just, they've got gumption.
Yeah.
They're gonna get out there.
That's right.
Yeah, they were really pleased with their sale. The
Yeah.
numbers of the last one.
Our next, is there any comments? Are you ready to pass out?
Actually, I have so many like ideas. Can I say one thing?
Yes.
The Boulder County and the City of Boulder have come together to do some grant funding called Survive and Thrive, and it's $7.8 million, and it's for local nonprofits who provide basic needs services. So I'm thinking the friends would likely qualify. Licensed child care providers and then unlicensed child care providers. And so the deadline to apply is March 28th.
It's leftover ARPA funds, so any,
Oh, okay.
yeah, so there will be some accounting for you will have to show, if I assume the library received some ARPA funds, but you'll just, if there were
We did.
things that were not covered, but you will have to show the receipts from what already has been covered in the
Got
past and then go back and look at
Oh,
things
okay.
that were not. So any gaps from that time
If we were
frame.
to do it,
Yep.
okay.
I would like to also say that, yes, like you need to declare if you did receive ARPA funds in the past. But I think it's kind of, like you can just say like what you use the ARPA funds for and maybe not have exact receipts for everything, right? And then there's no limit on what you can spend your money on if you are awarded the money, so.
That's good too.
That's great.
But yeah, $7.8 million back into the community, and I believe we have to spend it or we lose it, so, we'd rather give it out than not.
Mhm.
And so if you know anyone who provides childcare in their home for like their neighbor's kiddo or something, that's called a friend family neighbor, unlicensed childcare provider, they can apply as well.
But it's for things beyond childcare, or is it only for?
The nonprofits have to provide basic needs services, but the childcare providers and the unlicensed childcare providers can be for anything. But you had to be in business or operating in 2020 and 2021 and prove that you were affected by COVID-19. So Survive and Thrive is the name of the program.
Yes, so both, yes.
And we could find more information online.
Yep, boco.org/Survive and Thrive, or just Google.
Okay, thank you so much for that.
So I don't know if there's someone who can talk to the friends of the Longmont Library. I would strongly encourage them to apply as well.
There's people in this room that can.
Great.
Thank you.
You said you had other things.
Oh, no, that's okay.
Okay.
I'll ruminate on those later. Survive and Thrive was like the big important one.
Excellent.
Well, our next meeting is on the 21st of April. If there's anyone.
This doesn't affect me, but it is Easter Monday.
Okay.
I don't really know why Easter is a Monday.
Thank you for naming that.
I'll be here.
If
But
there's
if that
anyone
affects
who
anyone
can't
else.
be, just let probably Tracy know as soon as you can. Yeah, and then we can adjourn, we can end this meeting at 9:07. This meeting I thought was gonna be a short meeting.